Hey guys, July is wrapping up and that means it's time to film my July reading wrap up. These are all the books that I've completed so far in the month of July. I didn't really have a theme this month. I was just reading books that I've been wanting to get to. They've been on my TBR a while and I finally got to read them. Some of them lived up to the hype, some of them didn't. Let's get into it. The book that I completed most recently is a book by a favorite author. I had no idea that she had a new book releasing. Then I saw a post on Instagram and I was like, oh my gosh, Irene Sola has a new book coming out. I added it to the cart and ordered it right away. The book that I'm talking about is I Gave You Eyes and You Look Towards Darkness by Irene Sola and translated by Mara Faye Letham. Let's talk about the characters. I did really enjoy these characters. They were very campy. Joanna was my favorite character. So with these characters, as I said, they're very campy, they're quirky, they're a bit comedic but not cringy. But it feels like at any moment they could snap and this could get creepy because this is listed as a horror book on Goodreads. Now, I never necessarily felt scared, but this is a very lyrical writing style, so I like to read that out loud. And when I'm reading it, I'm like, should I be saying some of this stuff out loud? Am I letting demons into my house? Some of this stuff was kind of questionable, so at some points I was like, yeah, I better read this to myself and not be saying these words out loud. It was comedic, but there always felt like there could be that snap and things could get creepy real fast. We're seeing these characters through all life stages of their life, all life forms, and that was really interesting just to see how they might view different things at different points in their life. These characters, they are extremely, extremely flawed. They are not perfect at all, but it's not trauma dumping either. They're just very flawed people. They all have their issues. I would say those issues are put at the forefront of the story, but they were just so intriguing to read about and I never really knew what they were going to do next. Atmosphere was definitely my favorite part. This is taking place in the mountains in the Catalan region. And it just feels like the story is so ancient that it could be told at any point in history in the last 1,000 years. It felt like you were sitting around a fire and this old lady in the village was telling you these folk tales and fairy tales. That is the vibe of this, and I absolutely love that. I love that kind of story. So if you have recommendations for other ones that kind of have that folklore vibe, let me know in the comments because I love it. Now the writing, as I said earlier, this is told in a lyrical format and it does go on and on and on at times. I usually complain about that. Now I did like it here, but this book is only 159 pages. So if you're giving me that for a short amount of time, that's fine. But when that is a writing style for a 500-page book, no, I do not want to read that. That's too much. I would have to do the audiobook or something for that. I did read this one physically. Now going between timelines and all did get confusing at times, and I was just like, okay, where are we? What is happening here? But once you get a little into the book, that does become easier and you do start to adjust to the writing style. There are a lot of themes here of loneliness, of love, of motherhood, but I think the main thing is this little description here. I Gave You Eyes and You Look Towards Darkness is an audacious and entrancing novel in which the line between the dead and the living, past and present, story and history are blurred. In it, Irene Sola draws on oral tradition as well as art, literature, and fairy tales to tell a completely new kind of story that hits the nail on the head. I think that just how there is a fine line in life and that line is blurred, that yes, there's like, okay, this happened, but would this happen without this happening? So therefore, history can't exist without the present can't exist without history, and all of it is just a blurry mess. Life is a messy thing, and that, I think, is the main essence of this story. So yes, I did really enjoy this, but I do think it's an acquired taste. I'm still going to recommend that you pick it up. I do think When I Sing Mountains Dance by the same author is a better book, but these books, they feel like a fever dream. So I would recommend if you like Otesha Moshfegh and Mona Awad. Also, that's for the weird girl lit. And this book made me realize if a book is a weird girl book, it's if there's like bodily functions, bodily fluids mentioned in a book, I'm like, yeah, that's instantly. You go with Otesha Moshfegh over there. But the other books I got similar vibes for was 100 Years of Solitude. This story and curses and religion's another big theme here. That reminds me so much of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Also Northwoods by Daniel Mason. How one slot of land has so much history, and history is always going to be there. You can't erase it, even though people, you know, try to. That it's always going to be there. Its impact is always going to be there. So if you like any of those books, maybe give this book a go. Next book was one that I found by doing a bookish scavenger hunt. You can check out that video from a few weeks ago. And that is Every Rising Sun by Jamila Ahmed. This is a retelling of 1001 Nights. Scheherazade is our main character here. So Scheherazade is a storyteller. That's her thing. And she has grown up at this court in Persia, in the Seljuk Empire, and this is happening during the time of the Crusades. So she has always just been around nobility and has had a lot of time to observe that. So one day she catches like the wife of the Malik, and she catches that woman having an affair, and therefore that woman off with the head, you know? And so Scheherazade just feels really guilty about that. So she basically offers herself up to marry the Malik, who is very traumatized, and he's taking that out by he's getting married and killing the wives almost instantly. So she offers herself up to him, thinking that get redemption, I guess, for what she did to I can't remember what that is called, his wife, it just says his wife, to get redemption for telling on her. And so she feels like she can maybe change him and all. So you would think she becomes this great powerful woman, and she does, but the character work was not there. This whole middle of the book was a waste of time. We are seeing this long journey from Persia going all the way to Palestine, so that is a very, vast amount of land, and it just got tedious to read about. When we could have been having the character work in that time, we didn't. And that was just so disappointing, because it was just like a snap, and she's like, oh, this powerful woman, but where did that come from? It makes sense that this girl who grew up in the court and was so observant and everything, and who is fascinated by stories, because you learn from stories, would become this powerful woman. But we don't actually see that building happening on the page. That is left for just us to come up with in our head, and I don't think that's how books should be. But now the atmosphere, I did really like the atmosphere, and I really learned a lot. If you're somebody who likes like Middle Eastern fantasy, I think this is a great gateway. If you're into young adult, medieval inspired desert fantasy, this is a great way into historical fiction. I think that you would really like this book. But I was just learning a lot. But there was something with the world building. I'm taking in so much information because I'm not really familiar with the Seljuk Empire. I probably had only heard of it a few times before I picked up this book. And I was just taking in so much info and trying to adjust to this world. And I really wish there would have been more world building. But so, I'm trying to take in all these terms. I saw a lot of reviews saying there should be a glossary. And I do agree with that, because I was just very confused. But then this is going into the writing style. So as I told y'all, Scheherazade is a storyteller. So we would get instances of her telling these stories that, are from 1001 Nights. We have her telling all these like classic stories, but that would take me out of our main story. So I'm like, okay, I was trying to get a grasp of this world that we're in, then you're throwing me into a fictional world within this world, and I'm having to get a grasp of that. And it was just too much going on at once. That's how I would describe it. So the plot, I don't really have much to say about the plot. I think, as I told y'all, the start started really strong. We are being introduced to this world and these characters. There's a lot of political and court intrigue, but then we go on that big journey. Very tedious, takes up the majority of the book. Nothing is really happening. Like battles and all this are happening, but I don't feel anything, because I don't feel anything towards the characters. The end, again, it was just a snap, and we got kind of back to what we had at the start, but it lacked that character development to get there. So no, I would not recommend Every Rising Sun. The next book was a mood read, Every Bone a Prayer by Ashley Blooms. This is a magical realism story taking place in Appalachia. We have our main character, Misty, who she has a lot happening to her. There's a lot of changes happening in her life. Like her parents are having issues with their marriage, and they're just, she and her sister, they are pre-teens, they're tweens, you know, going into their teenage years, and a lot of awkwardness comes with that. And so she's feuding with her sister because her sister's a little bit older and is becoming a teenager, and Misty's still a little girl, and you know, so there's just a lot of tension and everything, living in close quarters in this trailer. And so Misty is just trying to find her place in this world, and then abuse starts happening to her, and she doesn't understand why this is happening to her, what is happening to her, and she's trying to make sense of that, and she is trying to hold on to that innocence that she has left. And it just, this book is a great depiction of how children deal with trauma, how they deal with abuse, trying to make sense of that in their head, and trying to, I guess, clutch on to everything that they have. For her, it's nature around her, that she just really wants to immerse herself in what she knows, because so much is changing, so she wants to hold tight what she still has. The atmosphere in here was pretty good. This is taking place in Appalachia, and I've never really read a magical realism story that takes place there, so I thought that was cool. But ultimately, the writing style turned me off from this, and I really didn't like the writing style. It was purple prose galore. It would just go on, especially at the start, just paragraphs and paragraphs describing stuff, and I'm like, you know, it's beautiful to start with, but once you're sitting there for a while, it's like, oh my gosh, get to the point. I don't need all this extra stuff. Like, we got the point in the first sentence, but then the author would go on for like 2 more paragraphs describing the same thing, and I'm like, I don't need all of that. I'm somebody who, once I got it, I got it. We don't need all the extra stuff. Yes, I think this is definitely more of a character-driven story. You do have that fantasy, magical realism elements and everything, but this is really just going into the character of Misty and exploring those themes of childhood trauma and how they are handled. And I do think that is a very powerful story, but because of the writing style, I'm ultimately not going to recommend this. But these are books that, if you like these books, then you might like this book. So Love, Pamela by Pamela Anderson. I know it sounds crazy, but Pamela is somebody who really immerses herself in nature and had a traumatic childhood. So I do think she would be able to relate to the character of Misty a lot. And again, the nature writing in here is pretty daggone good. I got country there. And then for the Appalachia setting and being a child coming of age, very much reminds me of Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So I give you one of my favorite nonfiction books and one of my favorite fiction books, but I didn't love this because of the writing style. But if you like the nature and if you like Appalachia coming of age story, then you might want to give this a go and see if it's for you, but right now I'm not going to recommend it. Next we have my book club pick, which was The Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean M. Auld. Lots of tabs here. Now let's go into the characters. So Ayla is our main character. She is a human, and she, like in the biological sense, a human like us, modern day, you know, Homo sapien. She is an orphan because her family, they died in a natural disaster, and she's left on her own in this world. And then she gets taken in by a clan of Neanderthals. So she is seen as an other because she does not look like them. She is a different species of human than they are. Now, this obviously causes a lot of issues because they're like, do we trust her? Do we want her here? What is wrong with her? Why does she look like that? She's ugly. And I think this is a great story of showing how somebody is trying to fit in. I think that's something that everybody can relate to at least once in their life, where you don't fit in and you're doing everything you can, but sometimes it's not good enough. But overall, I do think this is a bit of a chosen one kind of story, which we see a lot in fantasy and sci-fi. So seeing it in historical fiction was kind of interesting. But the stakes never felt high enough for me, because we would have this cycle of Ayla rebelling, then she would get in trouble, but nothing, exceptions were always made for her. So I was like, okay, like, nothing bad's going to happen to her. Like, yeah, all these terrible things happen to her, but there's not really going to be a real consequence for those actions. Everything's going to be okay in the end. And for me, I don't like that. We need, like, just the constant exception. She is the chosen one. in this story. On the atmosphere, this is world building galore. So much world building, so much research was put into this book. But the atmosphere, it was so fascinating because this is Europe. This is set in like the Crimea, Ukraine, Eastern Europe region of the world, but tens of thousands of years ago. So it is a place we're familiar with, but the author had to reinvent that place and take us back those tens of thousands of years to show what Europe was like back then, at the time of the Ice Age and everything. Oh my gosh, that's so fascinating to read about. And again, the amount of research put into this book, the author, she went to Mount Hood in January, which you know is in the Pacific Northwest, a cold region. So she went to this mountain, slept in a cave on what would have been like a bed for prehistoric humans. How can somebody do that? I have absolutely no idea. But that research is ultimately what bogged down this story, because it's like she wanted to use every ounce of research that she had to put into the story, where we would just have paragraphs going on explaining the science of things, how the brains of Neanderthals are different than modern day humans. And I was just like, this is too much. I don't need to know this much about tool building. Get to the point. And I understand that she wants to really flesh out this world, flesh out these characters, but it got a little much at times. Again, the plot is really about finding your place in society. There's themes of racism, colonization. You get all of that here, but in a prehistoric setting. I would recommend this with a maybe, because I did enjoy my time in this world and learning about this world and learning about these Neanderthals and their myths, their culture. I really loved those aspects of the story. But the character was a chosen one, which isn't really for me. Borderline Mary Sue kind of a situation there. And then the info dumping was a lot. But this is the first book in a series, so I do think that info dumping, we might have got it, all out the way. And as the story goes on and progresses, we might not have as much as that. But I really don't know. I'm not rushing to pick up the next book, but I'm not opposed to continuing the series. We do have a nonfiction book that is a carryover from last month, and that is A History of Milan Under the Sforza by Cecily Mary Addy. This title is pretty self-explanatory. This is an educational work from the early 1900s, so I'm sure a lot more research and all has happened since then, so I don't know how dated this is, but this did everything that I wanted it to do. This one, I think this is a good middle ground. I think you need at least some background knowledge on Renaissance Italy before going into this, but I still learned new things about how these Sforzas began, where they came from, because a lot of those big families in the Renaissance, like the Medici, did not come from nobility. They started out as, normal, modest backgrounds, but worked their way up. And that was how the Sforzas were. They really found their background in military and, made the right kind of relationships with people, and that got them where they did. I didn't know about their, backstory, and I didn't know really about their downfall either. Basically, after Gian Galeazzo Sforza, I'm hoping that's the right one. I always get Galeazzo and Francesco, and then whoever was married to Bona of Savoy, their son, he's like the last one I really knew about. I didn't know what came after him, so I didn't really know about the downfall of the family or about who ruled Milan after them. Now, I knew like Napoleon had, he had some influence and a few other people, but this really showed me everybody who was in power after the Sforza family, and I found that really interesting because I didn't know much about that at all. So I would recommend this with a maybe. Again, if you have some background knowledge, that is what I'd really recommend. If you have that background knowledge, I think you will find this book beneficial. It did everything that I wanted it to do, but this is very straight to the point where I'm like, oh, maybe I would have wanted to know a little bit more about that, but it's straight to the point, no lollygagging, and it's, fast paced. It's just kind of glazing over all these big moments. It's not really going down into the nitty-gritty detail. The next book that I have to talk about is one that I've been reading for several months, and that is The Treasury of Greek Mythology, Classic Stories of Gods, Goddesses, Heroes, and Monsters by Donna Jo Napoli, and illustrated by Christina Baylett, and I am so happy I read this when I did, because this gave me that background knowledge that I won't for when I read books that are like Greek mythology retellings, because y'all know I've recently in the last year, have gotten into ancient history, and this book laid such a great foundation of reminding me of these gods and heroes and goddesses from ancient Greece and the impact that they had on the world, because so much of our storytelling goes back to this time period and goes back to these kind of stories. So I loved getting to have this, and this will be a great reference book if I'm ever like, I have the book Hera right there, so if I want to know more about her, I can just go in here right there, read about her. These are short little sections, about 5 pages. The illustrations are beautiful, very much a Greek style in how they are done. So this one was a great foundational piece, and yes, I would recommend it. Those are all the books that I have completed so far in the month of July. We still have a little bit left, so stay tuned to my vlogs. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it all the way through, leave a birthday emoji in the comments below. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. I'll see you in my next one. Bye. If you are familiar with my videos, you're used to seeing Sherman at the end of them. Sadly, Sherman has since passed away, but I would still like to encourage you guys to help your local shelters. Sherman was at the Darlington County Humane Society in rural South Carolina. I always have their link down below in the description if you guys would like to help them, but also help your local shelters as well. You can do that by donating, sharing posts like this one, volunteering, fostering, and adopting, which it's great to do all of those things. Great to help your community, great to help the animals in your community, and I cannot recommend it enough. All of my pets were rescues, they were strays or from animal shelters, and I love them so much, and I know how much love they can give, so knowing these pets at the shelter can equally give that much love, it's amazing. And y'all should totally take part and help out those local animal shelter pets, and please help them.